Welcome to our latest webinar for WinBid Pro version 15. This particular webinar will cover the markup report. And the markup report is kind of the last report you would run for a job in the bidding process, so during the estimating part. And it basically puts in all the total costs with materials, glass, labor if you decide to use our software to calculate that, and then includes sales tax, any surcharges, any profit margin, or any profit markup that you need in that job. So now there's a couple things to remember. So first of all, I'm working with a sample job. We're using Cardinal Commercial Products. It's a company in Louisville, Kentucky that's recently, well, last year I guess, put a catalog out for our program. And I had one elevation. So before this webinar, I added 2 more elevations. And if I were just to go right to the markup report now, I wouldn't be getting all the information from those 2 new elevations. So much like other parts of the program, if I do anything like add elevations to a job or change an elevation by changing dimensions or shape or size or anything like that, I need to make sure I go to my optimizer and get the parts again and re-optimize, because cut pieces are going to change, quantities are going to change, all those things change when you either add or change elevations. So so the next thing is you want to make sure all your pricing's good before you get to the markup report, because that's what you're marking up. You're marking up your total price, cost price for the job, and then that's where you're getting your bottom line price with all your profit and tax included. So first thing we're going to do is go to Optimizer and click Optimizer, and we're going to get the elevation parts just like we would if we made any changes to elevations. And then I'm going to optimize. That's going to give me my stock length count. And at this point I don't need to do a cut list, of course, because we're estimating. And so now, if all my pricing was set and I close this, I could actually go into the markup report and it would show me all the correct material pricing. But I'm not sure if it's set right, so I need to get into the final parts and final glass reports to confirm that my pricing's right. So here I've noticed my multipliers are all 1, so I never set them in my parts list for this manufacturer. So that's something you would want to do so that you wouldn't have to mess with it every job you do. And the concept is you go to the parts list, the master parts list, you set your typical multiplier for most jobs, and then at the job level you can always edit the multipliers and change them here. So I can do it one at a time just by clicking on one of the rows of parts here, or I can say change factor. Now you might remember that this button affects the entire list that's showing. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the entire list of parts for this job to, say, a 0.5 multiplier. And then, so we see it did that here, then I'm going to actually filter down the list to, say, a certain group of parts, like door parts. So anything that's a door part, I'm going to change the multiplier to, say, a 4.8. And now I can get back to the list by hitting clear filter, back to the entire list, that is. And then let's say that's good. I can always, change one thing if I want, like screws. I can say my screws here are 0.4. So you kind of see how that works. So now I can just close this report and know that those numbers are going to be correct going into my markup report. Same thing with glass. I'm going to check and see what my glass pricing is, and it looks like it's not set to much. It's set at 1 cent. So the first thing I'm going to do here is filter my list to, say, tempered glass, and then I'm going to change the price of all my tempered glass. And this is just a exaggeration, because if there's different types of glass, you obviously want to do it differently, but for expedience sake, so let's say I make my tempered glass $4.50 a square foot, and then I'm going to change it so the annealed glass only shows, and I'm going to make that $3.25. Oops. So $3.25 for that. And I'm going to update those. Now I can see my whole list again, clear filter. So now all my glass is priced. I've got my bottom line price, or not my bottom line, my cost pricing for glass. and I'm good to go with that. So next thing would be labor. If you use our software to calculate labor, hopefully you've gone through the labor defaults and tweaked the hourly rates and the number of minutes per task for each type of framing system, and then that way you're confident that your labor is getting calculated correctly. So for this particular job, since I added 2 new elevations, I need to reapply the labor defaults, because that's going to go back, get all the labor defaults and apply them to the new elevations. And then, so I'm going to click that. And then the next step would be to process the labor, and that calculates all the totals for the job. So now at that point, I can go and go into the markup report and see my labor costs and everything, but I could always go in and check the different setup of the different elevations as well. So I can skip through. I've got first, second, third elevations. You know, they've all got values there. They all look good. So then this middle tab here is actually where, if you've noticed kind of a miscellaneous charge for labor that shows up, it is entered here for the job. So this little box here is job-related labor charges, just like it says here. And I can even change that. And these are set in the labor defaults, but I can always change them at the job level and see where, you know, basically configure it the way I want. So I've changed the 500 to 200. We'll see that when we get to, and I can even see that here. Oh no, that's right, that's elevation total. So I'm not going to be able to really see that until I get to my actual labor summary, or until I get to the markup report. So, and all it does here is list it as added labor, added job labor. So, but you see there that it shows it as 200. So basically, I've gone through and confirmed my pricing. I've, you know, made sure my multiplier is correct. I've made sure my glass square footage pricing is correct, and I made sure my labor is getting priced. So next step is actually going into the markup report. So now we've got all the different values here on the left. Now you'll notice that I've got zeros for surcharge, zeros for my markup, zeros for tax. All these things are set in the system defaults window. So that's actually what our next webinar is going to cover. So we'll kind of leave something for that. But again, that's another concept where you're configuring a master and then you're able to change it at the job level. So just like the glass, just like the labor rates, just like everything. So, so what we have here at the top on this left side is stock material. So under material, it breaks down all the different material costs. And you'll notice that any field that's white, has a white background, is something I can enter a value into. And then anything that's grayed out is something that is calculated and brought in from the reports for the job. So anything that's bold is kind of totaled. So it's a, you know, it's a combination of numbers to equal a total. So the stock material has its own total. Miscellaneous has its own total. So that's the screws, setting blocks, gasket material, water diverters, all that kind of stuff. So those things are identified by the part type, and that's why the part type is pretty important when you add new parts to our program. So it needs to know what part type you're working with. So door material, same thing. It only knows it's a door part by the part type that you're giving it, and you can manually add parts to these different report, or to the final parts report. You can even add them to the elevation parts report, I believe. I could be speaking out of turn, but definitely in the final parts report, you can manually add parts, and those will show up here based on what part type you've given that part when you add it. So anything that's not door and stock length basically is going to be miscellaneous, but anything that's door or entrance related will show up here, and anything that's stock or extrusion part type will show up here in the stock material. So total metal is one value, and then that value shows up again over here before we start adding surcharges and tax and markup. So glass is pretty straightforward. It's just one number. That comes straight from the final glass report, and you can manually add pieces of glass to that too. So doesn't really care what type, it's just glass. So that's where that number comes from. Anything added is going to change that value to the final glass report, but whatever is calculated from the elevations you've created will get totaled up and put into this field. So if you don't want to price glass, you obviously never add glass to your elevation, or you have zero pricing like we did before we started here. And then total material is just the combination of metal, hardware, doors, and glass. So total material is actually being used over here on the right. So it's a little tricky because that includes all these three different breakdown, and actually the others. So if I add, say, $500 here for some miscellaneous material, you're going to notice that this number should change right here. So see how it changed to 5,072? It equals this value. So really, whenever you change something or whenever you add a number to one of these white boxes, it's going to update the totals automatically as soon as you leave that field. So just like my add to labor, I can say I need to add $200. Where's our labor here? Total labor is going to show up here. So I hit tab, and then it's 3633, so that same number comes up here. So subcontractor costs, that can be anything. I can just add a number there. Equipment rental can be 1,000. Oops, that's 100. Can be 1,000. And miscellaneous, I'm going to leave that one blank. So my total outside costs are 3,500. That's going to show up here. And then, not sure why I flip-flopped these, but anyway. So now we've got all our different pricing, total breakdowns for the materials, labor, and any outside costs. So the next thing we need to set, since these weren't set in our defaults, is the surcharge. So let's say there's a 5% surcharge. I'm just going to enter a whole number 5. I'm not going to enter 0.05 because it's already taking it as a percentage. So I'm going to enter a 5 for glass. So you'll see right away there's a value here now under metal surcharge. So that's the actual surcharge on that total metal amount, which was $37.16, just like over here. And same thing with glass. So the total of our surcharges for this job are $253.63. And if we add the total metal, total glass, and all the surcharges, we get this value here. So that's actually the number we're going to use to mark up total material when we get down to this section. So now we're going to do the markup. So let's say metal is 25%, glass is 25%, outside markup is 20%, labor markup is 50%. So you probably saw these changing when I entered those. Let's just go ahead and do tax while we're at it. We're going to tax metal, tax glass, not tax the outside costs, and tax labor. So some people in California, they don't tax labor. Depends what state you're in. So you can either enter a value or not for that. So we've entered 8% in all those. So that's why we've got some tax a tax amount here now. Now this is a little tricky. So we get over to total material. We might have overcomplicated things by giving too much of a tax breakdown here, but the tax for metal and miscellaneous could be different than the tax for glass. So we're actually taking this number plus this number and taxing it. Actually, I'm sorry, this number, so the total metal plus the surcharge and the total glass plus the surcharge plus the, what am I thinking? Oh, we're going to do those separately. So if glass is, say, 5%, which I don't see when it would be, but it could be 5%. We're going to take total metal plus the surcharge plus the 25% markup, and we're going to apply the 8% tax to that. And then we're going to take glass, which would be total glass plus the surcharge plus the glass markup, which was 25%, which that could be different too. And we're going to multiply that by the glass tax, which is 0.05. So that's kind of how we're coming up with the tax value. So there's really just not enough room in the a screen here to show that breakdown of all those different calculations. So we're kind of giving you the short and sweet version of it here. We're just showing one sales tax amount, but keep in mind that that's how those values are getting included because of the fact that these can be different and these can be different. We have to do them kind of behind the scenes, pick the numbers apart separately, with the total material, the surcharge, and the markup, and tax them that way instead of trying to just take this number and tax it. So now outside costs is a little different because I decided not to tax that, but we could be looking at just this number plus this number and taxing it. Labor is simple too because that's one number plus the markup, and we would just tax that 8%. So that's how all the tax stuff is being figured. So the one option you have here is to not tax the marked up amount. So if I check this box, the tax becomes lower. Before it was 900 something, now it's 674. So when I check that box, I'm not actually taking the sum of material plus the markup or the outside cost plus the markup. I'm only taxing the total. So in this case, for where are we here? For taxing metal, I would actually be taking this amount plus the surcharge. The surcharge is taxed, just not the markup if I have that box checked. So I'm taxing this plus this, and that's going to give me the tax on the metal. And then for glass, even if it is a different rate, I'm going to tax this plus this. So I'm not including the marked up values for these for that breakdown. So, and then I can uncheck it at any time, and it shows it as 915. Check it. Now, one thing I noticed, if I print this, it should show all the same values as right here. And, there's the 674 for tax, there's the grand total. So all this stuff's the same. And I close that. Okay. So that report, sorry, get back to that. That report is the one that shows all the markup, all the breakdown, the surcharges and all that stuff. So if you want, obviously, the bottom line price to show something that you're going to give your customer, this is when we check this box, hide job costs on report, and get the bottom line pricing. So in this case, we've got, so the tax is easy. That's the same. Now, it's only going to show one value for tax, just because it's kind of too hard to break that down on a report like this. So just another reason why we should only have one value for tax on this part. But anyway, for total material, all we're taking is the same thing here. We're taking this plus the markup. And then for total labor, we're taking this plus the markup. And then outside costs, same thing, this plus the markup. So that's pretty straightforward. The report shows, just like the screen back there shows, total perimeter square footage, total square footage, and then price per square foot. So that's your selling price per square foot. On this report, it'll actually give you a cost price per square foot. And that'll obviously show up if you uncheck this box too. So those are your options for printing. Now, you may have noticed that on either report, these values up here are mostly blank. So they're mostly blank because we didn't fill out these tabs here. There's job notes and there's job info. So these tabs can be filled out by selecting something from a list. Now, my list is empty of my customers and contacts, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to Done. And down here under My Shop, we have customers. So customers could be architects, could be contractors, could be strip mall owners, it could be anyone. So it could be the government. So all we need to do is add a customer. So I'm going to say XYZ contracting, and this guy's a contractor. I'm going to pick that from the list here, sorry. So contractor, and the person's name is Bob Dole. Oops. So Bob Dole, his phone. So we're going to enter all this information in, and to expedite things, I will copy and paste here. I'm going to say he's got the same number there, and so you get the idea. We enter some values, and San Diego. So we can enter notes here, but this is only for this is only for this screen. So used these guys for South project. Whatever you want to say in there. That's not going to show up on the report. So now I've added someone. I could add a few more, contractors, architects, and all that. So now when I go back to the markup report and go to job info, I can say job status is quoting sample job. That's the name of the job that gets filled in. So now if I had them in the list here, I can just pick one, and I can say select, and that fills in all this information. So if I know the for the shop info, I can either type something in or I can pick it from our list of. So if you're doing a server sharing a catalog on your server and you've got all the users listed, it's easy just to click on it and all the different users will show up. If you did, when you created the user and you added the information, or you can even go back and edit it when you log in, it'll fill this out, but if not, you kind of have to fill that in yourself. So that's how that works. So same thing for selecting an architect. I can pretend this is the architect I need, and it fills all that information in. So now job notes. I can go over to sections bid, and I can put in whatever notes I need to list on this quote, on this markup report. And there's something in the system defaults that kind of helps give you a kind of a consistent start to the notes here and exclusions. So, something that would appear every time. So we'll go over that in the next webinar. But you can always add to it, you can change it, and you can obviously do what I'm doing here and just type them in as you go. So now's where we can go make sure everything looks good. We've got all our values entered. We've got all our contacts selected. So now's when we can actually print and get a little error. I'm going to close out of that real quick and get a markup. I'm going to look at that before the next update, but it's not a fatal error, so that's good. So yeah, everything's looking good. I'm going to print, and so the only thing that's not showing up is phone, fax, and license. That's actually for my company, which is again in the users, I believe. Let's see here. No, it's actually under my shop. So if I go to my shop, this is where that kind of information would be. So GDS estimating services, and John Voigt. So then my contractor license, which I need in California, all this kind of information. So this should show up on that markup report. And let's see. So I'm going to enter that. So my shop is something that's going to help the headings on all your reports. It'll help fill in that information, and markup report is no exception. So there we go. And I didn't fill in the phone and fax. But so that's kind of how that works. So you've got all the values here are, like we mentioned, are coming from the optimizer originally, the final parts, which is what gets all the different parts. So optimizer is just stock lengths. The glass report, the labor calculations, so the final labor report gets us our labor total. That additional labor, well, that's something I just typed in right here. But part of the labor number was that job labor that we could edit and change at a job level. And then we've got these costs that I just entered in manually. So you have a fair amount of flexibility. And And then definitely your surcharges, obviously those can be 0 if you don't need surcharges for this job. So I can 0 those out and you'll see all the pricing's changing. And this was something that came up when gas prices shot through the roof and, you know, suppliers started charging everyone surcharges. So that can be set to your liking, and then of course your markup. And most of this stuff can be set in the system defaults just so that it's there to begin with, and then you can obviously change it at the job level. So that's it. And remember these different checkboxes. If you do want to tax your marked up amount, which I believe in California we need to, we uncheck that box, and then the high job cost is that one that we checked when we want it to be like bottom line price. And this is where those notes show up at the bottom here, and all that top information is filled out. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much the markup report. We'll go over some more stuff in a couple weeks in the next webinar, and then next month we'll have some new topics to go over. So thanks very much for joining us, and hope to see you next time.